amendments which were brought.
Yes.
And some of them suffered setbacks.
Yes.
Others, there were difficulties because a great deal of politics was involved, and it involved outsiders also. And when I say outsiders, I mean people outside of the legislature. If, for example, you take the issue of federalism,
yes,
that suffered a setback.
Yes,
and
yes.
some people were quite surprised that it suffered a setback because all the hue and cry about restructuring under various forms and so on, it seemed as if the legislature bought into it, but then at the critical moment, it seemed as if quite a number of people backed out because maybe they weren't so sure. Maybe you can use this opportunity to tell us exactly what happened, because up till now, that matter has not been fully explained.
Yeah, right. You know, in 2011, well, no, 2014, we had a very comprehensive amendment to the Constitution, you know, and those, what we are referring to, which is the devolution of powers,
yes,
from the federal government to the states, was quite and extensively dealt with. So we moved a number of issues, including things like railway, you know, agriculture, education, some of well, agriculture is already in the concurrent list, but things like railway, we moved them to a concurrent list, you know, and aviation, and a number of issues. It was quite successful. It went past through the National Assembly, went to the states, passed through the states, we sent it to the president for assent. You know, at that place we had some issues. Eventually we even went to the Supreme Court with the federal government, and then the Supreme Court sent us back to go and settle. So we are dealing with that, and then the term of Jonathan expired. So we lost that opportunity. So when we came back, so in 2015, we started that process all over again. Of course, politics came in. You know, this issue of restructuring came in, and people became unnecessarily anxious. You know, I'm trying to see.
You said unnecessary. Why do you say that?
You see, because I believe that when you're talking, using the language like restructuring, it becomes complex to some people. But essentially what it's just saying is devolution of powers, giving more powers to the component parts of the country. You know, so, and so that the federal government will be slim, and then the powers will now be mostly at the state level. You know, and then in that case, you make the federal government a lot less attractive. So all these competitions will not be there again. And states will now develop at their own pace, you know, and then they have a lot to do, a lot to generate funds, and a lot of responsibility as well, you know. So people can now grow at their own pace. So we've not been able to explain this to a number of our people, especially our brothers in the north. So when you talk about restructuring, for them it becomes something they have to be anxious about. So, but it's something we need to sit down and explain to our people that it is a win-win situation for everybody. The federal government has presently constituted is not in position to carry out all the responsibilities contained in exclusive legislative list, and then we'll still have a federal system of government. It's not going to happen. You know, so until we look at that, look at what's happening with security, for instance. So long as the security is in the hands of the federal government, we're going to continue to have problems. Because security in itself needs to be devolved, at least to the level of the states. You know, because each state needs to have the type of security that will fit into their own circumstance. Today we have Boko Haram in the northeast. So if you have state police, so they're going to get people who will be trained to fight insurgency. In the southeast, for instance, we have kidnapping. If you have state police, those police will concentrate and train and learn how to deal with the issue of kidnapping. You know, so if like in Lagos, so we have a different scenario. You know, so that's why we need to ensure that each state of the federation will have their own police, and then be able to decide which priority they'll give to the issue of security. So if, for instance, a governor decides to put 20% of his budget in terms of security and the place is secured, then it's most likely that people will move from places that's less secured to go and live in those places. But people are also fearing, oh, well, the governors use it. Yeah. Again, that is part of our problem. Sometimes we identify a problem. Instead of trying to find a solution, we run away from the problem. So what has happened is that people are afraid that governors will misuse it. But that's not going to happen because other countries have the type of system we are now prescribing for our people. So the question is, how have they been able to deal with it to ensure that nobody will abuse it? Because human beings are naturally the same thing. The Bible says that the heart of man is always evil. So when you say man, black, white, whatever you call it, so it is the way you apply our laws, especially the efficiency of the security agencies that will determine how far people can obey laws. So what they've done in other countries is to set up a system that makes it impossible for any person to abuse it. So let's take for instance in Nigeria, you have state judiciary, you have federal judiciary. So these judges, they preside over courts in the states. How many persons had complained that the new governors are using the judiciary to persecute them? No. The reason is that we have an NJC that controls all the judges, whether they're federal or state. So if we're afraid that the governors will use this police to intimidate the opponents, then we'll now have a police service commission, a national police service commission, that will be able to discipline the people who conduct these police affairs in the states and appoint some of them, and regulate what they do, just as it happened in judiciary. And then the commission will be constituted in such a way that their impartiality would also be secured. This is exactly what they did in Brazil. They've done it in Australia, in Canada. In other places, they have a decentralized police system. So they put measures in place that make it impossible for it to be abused. Because the primary thing is to ensure the protection of lives and property. Yes. Once you're able to achieve a system that can do that, all you now do is to make sure that that system is not abused. And you put measures in place to ensure that it's not abused.
Now, talking about devolution of powers, you've talked about from the federal to the states.
Yes.
An equally contentious, if probably not more contentious one, and that's the one I was referring to earlier when I said it also involved outsiders.
Yes.
Was that it would appear as if it were left entirely to the National Assembly, the devolution of powers or the strengthening of the powers of the local government, which are the ones which are supposed to be the closest to the people and are supposed to be the first line of contact,
yes,
would have gone through. But many legislators have very close relationships with their governors, and it would appear as if many of the governors don't want the local governments to be completely free, autonomous, or independent. How does one meander around that kind of thing at the level of the legislature?
Well, you see, we have to decide the structure of federalism. Some federal states have two tiers. You have the state, you have the federal government, like what you have in America. Some will also have a system where the federating units includes the local government, just as you have in India. But our own is a bit tricky. You cannot really say whether Nigerian federalism is a two-tier federal system or three-tier. Because if you look at the section 7 of the Constitution, it's talking about that the states will ensure that there is a system of local government that is democratically elected. So what you have done simply to say that the local government is the business of the state. But if you go to section 162 of the Constitution, talking about revenue sharing, it's saying that this revenue will be shared amongst the states, the federal, and local government. Again, you are talking about three-tier. So this is what we wanted to synchronize for us to ensure what actually we want. And most people believe that the best thing to do is to allow states to decide how many local governments they want. Now, but the problem here is that already in the Constitution, some people already have advantage in terms of more local governments and therefore more revenue. So they won't listen to you if you do that, because what that means is that you're going to abrogate the local government where a lot of people are already making money. So others therefore are saying, let us therefore strengthen the local government to remain a third tier of government across the country. So what that means therefore is that those who have lesser number of local government will be stopped, and of course, creating more local government as provided for in the Constitution is also very difficult. So now, and again, the governors themselves want a situation where they will control what happens in the local government because of the so-called joint local government state accounts. So the last effort we made was to separate these accounts so that monies will go straight to the local government, independent of the states. It wasn't a novelty in any way. So because it had happened in the past. In 1997, I was a local government chairman under UNCP. I was elected. At that period, the allocation for local government comes directly to the local government. So we benefited from it. So, and it worked. It helped us to do a lot of development at local government level. So we believe that we can do that again. But because the states want a pool of resources in which they can do other projects, most states try to make sure that that doesn't happen. So when we finally pass this at level of National Assembly, it went to the states. As I speak with you, it is still lying there with the states. So we hope that they'll be able to do something about it.